And now Secretary of State Antony Blinken is traveling to Ukraine. He's going to meet with President Volodymyr Zelensky as tensions with Russia escalate there. Secretary Blinken is going to then meet with the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, on Friday to continue discussions on what the administration calls this extremely dangerous situation. Quote unquote, Russian forces massing near the border with Ukraine for weeks, giving every indication they intend on invading there. Recent moves of Russian troops into Belarus now. It's a neighboring country on the other side of Ukraine, sparking urgent concerns about a possible two-pronged invasion, if you will, of Ukraine. And we're happy to have our senior foreign correspondent, Pannell. He is on the scene in Ukraine. Ian, good to see you. The White House here using that phrase, extremely dangerous, warning that Russia really could attack at any moment. I'm not sure that Americans are awake to that possibility. You're there. What does it feel like to you on the ground?
Yeah, it's interesting that they said that. I mean, clearly they feel that the mood music, at least, is alarming, that you had these three key diplomatic meetings last week, and it essentially resulted in an impasse. You had Russia stating what seemed to be an immovable position, that it wanted a guarantee that Ukraine would never join NATO, and you had the Biden administration, Secretary of State Blinken, and NATO all making it clear that no such guarantees would be forthcoming. So in other words, the gulf was so big that you couldn't bridge it. We've then seen more troop movements, or certainly movements of military equipment close to the border. We now have this going on in a different area. I think there is a sense on the ground, however, we're still not quite there. Even though the White House is saying that the Russians could order an attack at any time, we were talking to one senior military analyst here earlier today who's saying, yes, look, there is lots of equipment in place. There are lots of tanks, lots of artillery and other key military equipment, but the troops still aren't quite there. Is it getting closer? Yes. Are we there quite now? I don't think so. And also the weather plays a part here. The east of Ukraine is largely flat. You're onto the steppe territory there. It kind of rolls on into the distance, flat, gently undulating, and it's also agricultural land. Now, the weather hasn't been as cold as it normally would be. What that means in practical terms is it's very difficult to send huge numbers of tanks rolling across that ground until it's actually really frozen solid. It's starting to get colder here. It's freezing standing out here right now, but it has to be consistently cold for the ground to be hard enough for those troops and those tanks to kind of get across. But there is a sense here in Ukraine, no sense of panic amongst the population, but politically, of course, they're talking closely with the Biden administration, and they're acutely aware of this slow ramping up of the pressure and what they see as a campaign of intimidation.
Well, let me ask you, Ian, to look to the other side and draw on your experience and expertise on Russia and Vladimir Putin, the mystery man, right? It's one thing to maybe tear off a small part of Georgia, which he has, or whatever. Invading Ukraine, it's such a huge undertaking. It's a giant risk. What's going on in the Kremlin, do you think? Do you think this is for real?
Yeah, Terry, I couldn't agree more. And again, it was a question that I put to this military analyst who helped produce a map that appeared in the New York Times over the last day. It's one thing to kind of annex Crimea or move into eastern Ukraine, Georgia you talked about as well. But Ukraine is a huge country. There's a large amount of land involved. Taking it perhaps is possible. The Russian military is certainly stronger. Holding it will be very, very difficult. This analyst felt that the Dnieper River, which pretty much cuts through close to where we are here in Kiev, could potentially be a cut-off line. Is it a threat? Is it real? I mean, the truth is nobody knows. Hardened Kremlinologists who spent their entire careers looking and trying to read the tea leaves of what's going on, there are deeply divided. There is a possibility here that this is brinkmanship. High-scale brinkmanship, that this is about extracting other concessions. For example, you could see NATO training exercises move away from the border. You could see the US and Russia getting back together with a treaty on short-range missiles. However, they've never done this before. Putin has never done this before. He's never deployed this level of military assets close to the border of another country, and so there may well be pressure there and an inevitability about it that you have to do something. He's consistently said there won't be an invasion. There'll be a military technical response. Could they deploy missiles, artillery in other places that would be seen as a threatening posture, perhaps around Europe, Venezuela and Cuba have been mentioned. That would seem unlikely, but again, not impossible. The short answer, Terry, is no one really knows what Vladimir Putin's planning, but it's absolutely true that this is more serious crisis between Russia and America, and certainly crisis that Ukraine's facing, than at any time since the end of the Cold War.
It really is. You can sense it. And he's been making the case, essentially, for an act of aggression, ideologically and politically, a list of complaints, some of them fabricated. But one more question, Ian, and that is on what the United States can do. What can Europe, united Europe under the banner of NATO and the United States, do to dissuade him or to respond?
I mean, potentially, I guess there's a whole host of measures that they could try and put into place there. We know the Secretary of Blinken is kind of heading over to meet with Foreign Minister Lavrov, as well as meeting with President Zelensky here in Ukraine, and also going to Germany. So that seems partly about trying to shore up the Europeans, trying to reassure the Ukrainians, and trying to offer the Russians some kind of diplomatic solution. This time yesterday, we were meeting with US senators who offered, if you like, something more of a stick. You know, Secretary Blinken is offering a carrot of a diplomatic solution, some kind of compromise. The senators are saying, look, if you carry out these threats and you invade partially or carry out military action, the consequences economically for Russia are going to be catastrophic. Individuals will be targeted, but potentially the entire banking system is there. So there are real options there for America. America is heavily engaged here. I think the reason that we've seen this announcement from Jen Psaki and others over the last few hours is because they're trying to draw attention, not just to the American public, but also of the Europeans, to the imminence of this threat. But I think there's also wiggle room there. I don't think we're quite there yet, but it feels that every day it gets closer and closer, and the possibility of a solution doesn't seem to be getting any closer.
And the margin for error in these kind of situations grows very small. Ian, Pannell, thanks very much from Kiev for that.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.